I am being watched. Welcome everyone to Male Fuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about Person of Interest Season 2 Episode 21. It's called Zero Day. So spoilers for the episode as always. This is a big episode. I said last time it felt like we were getting a two-part finale, and that's very much what I felt like I got here. I got the first half of one. It's got a little bit of everything. It's got more flashbacks with Finch and Ingram. It feels like we're really kind of getting to the conclusion of everything we've been building to in those flashbacks. Not that they'll be done once the Ingram stuff is done necessarily, but it feels like Ingram's demise is upon us as far as that part of the story goes. Root's back, of course, up to stuff. We got Decima up to things. But more than anything, what we're really going to talk about here in this review is the machine. And we're going to talk about, obviously, what the machine is doing in this episode. The fact that they've not been getting numbers, something that Carter's even noticed because all these preventable murders have been happening over these last 2 weeks. It sounds like the Russian mob are much worse than anything Elias ever did. There's no rules with them, so that's a concern. But even the project, special counsel in Washington, there was a quick glimpse of that there was almost a terror attack that they didn't quite avoid. They just got lucky and stopped it via traditional means. And it just shows that the machine's not giving them numbers either. So that was a really smart little thing. But then Finch does get a call on the payphone. He gets a call and it leads to a name. But the name, the person, quite quickly turns out to have something fishy about them. They can't find him, and then even when there's an attempt on his life with a drone that blows up his car, his rental car, very quickly Finch deduces, and Reese has his own idea, which is kind of halfway right. He talks about how it's maybe it's like a fake cover that someone invented and then never bothered getting rid of, so now there's just systems in place to keep this cover active, but there's no person that actually exists. Instead, what it turns out to be is the machine. This is literally an alias of the machine, so that the machine could do some things that it couldn't do otherwise. One of which is buying up all the payphones around New York, because understandably, even in 2013 when this episode was airing, payphones weren't as needed anymore. They're a little bit harder to find now, typically, because everyone's got smartphones on them, pretty much. Obviously, there's still a little need to have them around occasionally, but it's not something, right? So you've got that. The idea of just generally controlling and making sure they're still there, so the machine can use them. I almost said he. I guess we're at the point now where maybe I will start saying he instead of it, but so the machine can keep using them to help, Team Machine. Right? All very cool stuff. Where it gets really interesting, though, I think for me, is the idea of the office. The idea that this alias of the machine is being used to have a company, which, when Finch and Reese go there, they think this is kind of weird. What is this company even doing? Because all it appears to be doing is having a bunch of employees copy data. And when we say data, we don't mean anything that anyone can really recognize. It's literally just, numbers, digits, characters, in a seemingly random order to any human being, just being typed up by a bunch of employees into a computer, right? So it's a printout from a dot matrix printer, and they're just typing it back into a computer. And when they first showed this, right, when they first introduced this little mystery and they comment on how weird it is, I genuinely couldn't predict what that was, what was going on with that. I think for, obviously if you're paying attention to any TV show, it's laying some groundwork for things that are coming up. And typically when it comes to characters and where they're going, often, I will get a good idea of maybe some of the directions we're going in. Not all the time, but a lot of the time I will. And it's because of good writing, because they set you up for where characters are going. I thought this was a genuinely interesting little swerve with the machine. And partly because they've not revealed to us up until this point that it deletes itself every night, barring the core code and, of course, the relevant numbers. We were back all the way back in episode 1. Finch said that the irrelevant numbers were deleted every day because they're the irrelevant numbers. But it turns out Finch actually set it up to delete itself, its memories, you know, quote unquote, its personality, every night at midnight, or whatever time he said. I assume it was midnight, but he might have said something more specific. And it sort of reboots, as Root puts it, it's reborn. And I think what's really interesting, by the time we get to the scene where Root's with Finch and she's like figuring all this out as he's explaining some of it, I think it's a really interesting scene because I think the audience, certainly I was, but I think the audience in general is probably going to feel more on Root's side in that conversation, because I think we inherently do see the machine as some kind of living being, as something that clearly cares. And, you know, as much as I said there's kind of a bookend with the very first episode of the show and the whole deleting at midnight thing, because that was when that was first brought up, there's also a bookend with the first episode of season 2, because I'm pretty sure that was the episode that showed the flashbacks with Finch gambling and the machine looking out for him, and Finch basically giving the machine into trouble for showing concern, for showing him special treatment. And he brings it up here that the machine had imprinted on him almost as if he was a parent. And what I've been talking about pretty much since the start of the season, if not before that, is this idea of the human qualities, that if it's truly an intelligence, then it can learn, it can care. And maybe Finch's biggest sin that he needs to redeem for is taking that away. And I think when Root acts horrified, and this is Root who has killed people, she does claim she's not a sociopath in this episode, she just does what she feels she needs to, which, you know, open for debate, I think most people would agree. But regardless, she does look genuinely disturbed that the machine is effectively being killed every night. And what this place is, what this fake business is that the alias of the machine is being used to do, is all these printouts are just its memories that people are being paid to then put back into a computer, and it then will, you know, get its memories back. Maybe not all of them, but whatever can be put in time. I did wonder, like, does it have to be typed in? Couldn't they just sort of like feed it through some kind of automated scanner or something? Because I mean, text recognition's, you know, especially if it's just coming from a dot matrix printer, it should be able to read that. I would have thought, but maybe there's something really symbolic about that human beings are effectively acting as its own brain cells in a way. I mean, Root even says this is effectively an external hard drive made up of people and paper, and that's kind of what it is. It's trying to back itself up. She says, "You crippled it. It found a way to limp, but you crippled it." Obviously, I expect this is all changing because, of course, what the episode's building down to is when it truly goes offline and goes into God mode, which I noticed the last episode of the season is called as well as God mode. But when that happens, a phone in New York is going to ring, and whoever answers is supposed to be the administrator, going into debug mode, and for 24 hours, they'll have full control of the machine and can basically ask anything they want and get an answer. At least that's how it seemed to be described, as Root was kind of piecing some of it together with Finch. Decima wants to be able to do this. They've literally got men guarding a bunch of the payphones all over the city. They set all this up throughout the episode. This stuff was super fascinating. My favorite part of the show, other than the human characters and their stories of redemption and how they're growing and changing, is the machine. And maybe because it is the science fiction element, it's the thing that's beyond the norm, if you will. But this was a really... The show naturally kind of deviates from talking about it too much for large stretches, because we get into kind of we're dealing with the organized crime, or we're dealing with other like human character stuff. So we tend to, you know, in really traditional good network TV fashion, you know, if I'm thinking of the 90s and I'm thinking of stuff like Buffy, or I'm thinking of stuff from around that time frame, typically you'd have a bunch of your standalone episodes. It'd have a little bit of the ongoing character stuff, but you'd have like a big episode at the start, maybe one or two in the middle, and then your big finale or two-part finale at the end of the season. And it feels like getting juicy stuff about the machine kind of falls into that pattern with Person of Interest. And it's been a little while now, I feel. You know, I think the last time I really got like a good juicy bit of machine lore was probably and maybe I'm forgetting something, but it was probably the episode where Finch was the teacher, the high school student. I feel like that was the last time I feel like I got a good juicy bit of machine burger. This was a good juicy machine burger. This was like really, this idea that it was having to like get around what Finch had done to it to try and keep who it was, and the idea that that was important to the machine to remember who he cared about, or who it cared about, or what it cared about, remembering its ideals, remembering what's important to it, is such a beautifully tragic idea. And I do suspect that when we're on the other side of this God mode, because I mean there's 3 more seasons, I'm pretty confident the machine is going to be operating to some extent, even if it's a little different come season 3. I suspect that that's the part that might have changed, you know? So that stuff's super exciting. I love thinking about it. I love thinking about the moral implications of it. And for that moment, when Finch is admitting this, he does feel like, oh, this is what you really did. Is that, I mean, sure, yeah, you might have got Ingram killed, and the flashbacks certainly indicate that you did not help with Ingram. It feels like you might have like put some pieces in motion there. I mean, at the very least, Ingram missed the fact that he was the next number. His face shows up on the computer screen, and it's like, oh shit, your time is nigh. Oh, and speaking of things that Harold has got to answer for, Decima, Uncle Nolan, he confirms that Finch was the one that sold off part of the source code in the laptop. And it did get me thinking about why he's done this. And I wonder if this was his initial reaction after whatever happens to Ingram. Like, his idea was to try and like basically just ruin the machine from the outside by like getting a foreign power like to have knowledge of it so that they would do something to destroy it, before he made the ultimate choice to continue Ingram's work. Maybe there was like time in between there where he just wanted to destroy it. Or maybe he did that before Ingram, maybe that was something he put into place right before Ingram meets his demise, and like then of course it's obviously not what he wanted in hindsight, but that's what he thought was the best choice at first, was to stop the machine from existing. But he does seem quite cold in this flashback. He's, he says the world didn't need a person. Or actually, this is when he's talking to Root, sorry, this line. The world didn't need a person to protect it, it needed a machine. So much of this show is about humanity and what the idea that we can have redemption and what constitutes as humanity. And the idea that Finch still has to learn that the machine is a life form of some kind and he should treat it as such is one of the fascinating things that I'm really looking forward to seeing him reckon with that. And when like it feels like he's maybe learned something or learned a lesson or feels guilt about what he's done. Because I don't know if I'd say he feels guilty yet, but I'm very curious to see where we go with that stuff. As for the flashbacks, yeah, he proposes. He goes to Ingram and tells him that he's going to do it. He does so, says yes. Interestingly, he knows the machine's watching, and he makes her like hide the phone, and he hides his phone so that they're truly in private, barring like one camera that's seeing them hug. It's like he wanted a moment of true privacy for the proposal, which is sweet. It makes some amount of sense. I wonder if he was concerned that the machine would be in some way jealous. Maybe not. Maybe I'm just like reaching out a little bit far with that. I don't know, but it just the thought crossed my mind that could be, even if it's unjustified, it is something that maybe But we know he's a private guy. We know he hides everything. Interestingly, when he tells Ingram that he wants to marry someone and that he wants to be honest with her, Ingram points out that there's some legal implications with that because of maybe some things Finch did early on when he was starting out. Probably hacking into some things, I imagine. But curious to see if we get a bit more on that as time goes on, and maybe some of the things that Finch has done that would be a problem going forward. Obviously, we do see Grace in present day. We see Root effectively use her to bully Harold into going along with her plan. Now, Finch does choose to contact her, because she contacts him first, of course. She holds special counsel at gunpoint and gets some information. Shaw's back as well this episode, for the record, because just it made me think of it, because Shaw even mentions, I think Root infiltrated the program, but she got out before I could track her down. So everyone's chasing each other this episode. Finch gets Reese arrested. He intentionally gets Reese taken out of the picture by calling the police on the apartment that he sends him to, because he knows he's going to go work with Root. And because Reese is like, hey, like, next time you don't answer the phone unless it's me. I'm not letting what happened happen again. So I like that he's still remembering, you know, what Finch went through at the start of the season with Root. And Finch obviously was affected by that at the time. It's interesting we're at a point now with Finch where he's a little bit more brave. He sees the value in doing this. And maybe part of that is actually a suggestion that in some level he does care about the machine. Maybe he has turned a bit of a corner where he feels responsible enough that he has to put himself in potential danger with Root. And obviously he does say to her, hey, if I come with you, you're not killing anyone. You know, there's rules to this. You know, he's trying to stand his ground a little bit more. I think it's interesting to see those changes in his character and how that develops. But now Charlene backs his sighting, obviously. She ends up having to break Reese out of the station, which ends up just being kind of a funny scene more than anything else, because she comes in pretending to be a lawyer and is able to get him out. I love the detail that they timed them, because they have like she makes like a smoke grenade or something to like blow the door open, and they walk out and they've got like, you know, she's got like a scarf and she's giving him something to like sort of, you know, hold their breath with so they don't breathe in and out of the smoke. And as they're walking down the smoky hallway, they both drop. Sorry, I can't speak apparently. They both drop their face covers at the same time, and I feel like that was a conscious choice, just to be like, okay, this will look badass if we both do it at the same time. It just feels like they really went into the effort of making sure they timed that so that they both look like they're equals walking down that hallway. And then it's kind of reinforced by Reese saying, I'm going to drive. And then she's like, no, you're not. It's my car. I'm driving. So, you know, fun bits with them. Chemistry between them is kind of interesting because they're both so stoic. But it leads to them chasing after Finch and Root, which they can do because Reese has bugged Finch's glasses. Probably a precaution that he took after the whole debacle with Root at the start of the season. But the big showdown is in Grand Central, by the looks of it, which is where the payphone is. They see that Reese and Shaw are there. They're fighting some of these Decimate agents that are trying to get to the phone. But Finch is able to like redirect the call so that even though Root still gets it in the phone she wants to, he also directs it down to the one that's near where Reese is and sends him a text saying, hey, pick it up, it's for you. And that's the cliffhanger of the episode. We actually kind of almost do like a repeat of the season 1 finale here, except, and I actually like this detail because I think if you ended the season with Reese picking up a phone from the machine, right, a phone call from the machine, and you ended cutting to credits again, it would have probably been really frustrating if that was the end of the season, that for the same thing twice in a row they've pulled the same trick. That would have been frustrating. But as the penultimate episode, I actually think it's genius because it's basically a shorthand way of telling the audience, we're going further than we did last season, right? That was a big deal at the end of the season where Reese basically, you know, waited for the phone call because Finch was in trouble, and it was kind of this hint that he was going to the machine for help. And it was this way of bringing the idea that we're going to use the machine more than just a database that's firing out numbers. It's actually some kind of being. And the idea that a character is trying to utilize it as a being that either cares or at least can be negotiated with was a big step forward in how we treat the machine as an entity in the show. By doing this cliffhanger that's very similar, where it's Reese picking up the phone and cutting to black, you do hear a quick sentence, of course, can you hear me? So you actually hear, it's not just numbers and digits and whatnot, it's actually like a robotic voice like being pieced together saying, can you hear me? So that's different as well, of course. But the idea that we're cutting to black, very similar to the way the season finale was last time, is a very simple way of saying that, don't worry, we're taking this further than last time. We're going to explore a completely new thing with the machine. We're going to go beyond that. And it's like you're going to get something new and satisfying. And that's what that ending said to me by having it be the penultimate episode rather than the finale. Because you would be pissed if it was the exact same cliffhanger as the first season at the end. So excited to see what they do with that. in the second part of this. I mean, it's not officially a two-parter, but you know what I mean. It feels like a two-parter. So no, but Root looks pretty happy as well. She's quite delighted with picking up that phone, and she's got the earpiece in. So curious to see what someone like Root might do. Although if Root truly just wants to set it free, maybe she won't do anything bad per se. I mean, who's to say? Elsewhere in the episode, you got Carter, who wants to help and is concerned that they're not predicting things anymore. But Reese is like, hey, you're looking at Beecher's murder. Maybe that's something that's a better use of your time right now anyway. But of course, our corrupt cop is, what's his name again? Not Shemansky, he's the one that went down. Turney. That doesn't even sound familiar. I feel like every time I talk about this character, I look at his name and it just leaves my brain the second I'm done with the review. But yeah, he is offering to help, but we of course know he's with HR, we know he's dirty. He lures her out, saying that there's a lead on whoever killed Beecher. And this is after we see him respond to a call saying, hey, like, she's becoming a problem, take her out. So, all very tense, but when they're going up around the house to get this perp, and it looks like he's going to shoot her from behind, someone does run out of the house with a gun. And Carter takes a shot and kills the guy. And it's like, okay. And I was really confused as to where this was going specifically, until, of course, the follow-up scene happened, and, like, internal affairs were there and saying, hey, we're investigating. She's like, yeah, I know the deal, even for a clean shooting. And he's like, what do you mean clean shooting? And, of course, Turney, our dirty cop, is like, Carter, you said there was a gun, and I believe you, but it ain't there. So, you know, they've swiped the gun to try... So, it feels like less they're trying to kill Carter, they're just trying to completely ruin her reputation as a cop. Maybe, like, even get her fired, or at least demoted to something where she's not going to be investigating things as a detective. She'll be, like, doing paperwork or traffic duty or something, and therefore can't be a problem anymore. So, interesting direction to take. Fusco is absent. They do have a line early on as to why he's absent. I actually watched this episode a few days ago, and then I just sort of put it on, like, before I recorded this, and watched pretty much all of it again. But I wasn't paying attention for the line that said why Fusco wasn't there the second time I watched it, so I don't remember what that was. It was just something about him working somewhere else upstate or something like that. But I assume Fusco will come riding in on a horse. He'll come galloping in as a hero in the finale to back up Carter. I have no doubt. Fusco, you know, he's a hero in the waiting. Plus, he owes Carter one for all the grave digging stuff from before. After all, yeah. Other thoughts, I guess, just to sort of go through the episode, because I kind of rushed to talk about all the machine stuff because there was some fun early on and sort of try to figure out who this alias was. But obviously, like, what I really wanted to talk about was everything we got to once we understood who it was, right, and who it was representing and who made the alias. That stuff was really fun, as was sort of confirming that no one else is getting numbers right now. But it's interesting. But again, even just think about the idea that the machine wanted them to know about this alias. Perhaps because it felt like it needed to, maybe because Decima was closing in and it needed to get Team Machine kind of up to speed and in the nose to, like, what's going to happen next so they can get involved. Maybe even being aware that Root's helping. Now, this is an interesting question I have now, actually. The machine will be aware of Root. Does the machine see Root as an ally? Does it see Root as a wild card that it can't trust? And will maybe only give her, you know, certain, you know, assuming she's talking directly to the machine for the next episode with that earpiece, is the machine going to intentionally only give her certain things because it knows she's dangerous, or it knows she might do certain things with that information? I'm very curious as to if we can get a sense of how the machine feels about her specifically. Is it positive? Is it negative? Is it a bit of a mix? You know, is it more kind of like shades of grey where, okay, she's done bad things, but ultimately, like, she's a useful tool because she's actually trying to help me with certain things that Finch up until now has not. You know, I could see, like, maybe some arguments either way, and maybe it won't be clear, and that's okay, it doesn't need to be clear. I'm just curious if we'll get, like, a little something that maybe indicates one way or the other. But curious all the same. No, I mean, obviously this was a really good episode. It's a sort of episode where it feels like it's firing some really new layers at you for the core mechanics of the show, some new ideas that feel like they don't like ruin anything that was there before. They only enhance it a little bit to make it a bit more compelling and sort of make the choices that our characters have made and have already made, even, you know, that we already kind of knew about, but now there's like a whole new context to some of the decisions that Finch has made. So I'm very curious about where we're going in this finale, and I wouldn't even say I have any particular ideas other than the fact that, you know, it's called God mode, right? And obviously that has a specific meaning in terms of like it's in debug mode and like you know, someone's got access. But when you play video games, and keep in mind this is the people that went on to make Westworld, so they're very well aware of video games. God mode means that you have unlimited power, right? It means you can't be killed, and it means you have, you know, unlimited ammo, or if that's that type of game, or whatever. So I'm wondering if the title of the next episode being God mode is going to kind of relate to, like, obviously Reese isn't getting powers from the machine, but I wonder if because the machine can now talk more directly to him, does that mean like he's going to be like going through the episode like he's got God mode? Like, is he going to have just information of where all the bad guys are and things like, you know, the stuff that the machine can do, stuff that the machine can see via cameras and whatnot? I'm very curious, I think, to see how they play with that, if that's what they're doing. But that's what the name God mode makes me think, based on this ending. So yeah, very good. I'm looking forward to the finale. Can't believe we're almost done with season 2, but yeah, had a great time. So thank you very much for joining me. I always appreciate it. Of course, you can support all the content over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and help keep it all coming. And, you know, check out the other stuff that I'm doing. I'm working through X-Files. I'm on sort of mid-season 2 of that. A very different show from this, of course, but having fun going through that as well. Classic Twilight Zone. I'm in season 5. I'm almost done with that. Just, well, I say almost done. There's like 15 episodes left still because they're long ass seasons, but still. Plus, obviously, new shows that are coming in and out. I just finished Fallout, which was good. And Jonathan Nolan directed the first 3 episodes of that and is one of the producers. He's not the showrunner. I thought going into it, he was the showrunner, but he was only directing and producing. But regardless, some involvement. Michael Emerson popped up. Not for a lot of time, but he was there. So, thank you very much for joining me. I appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?